please welcoming Dane to senior capstone presentation.
Thank you all for coming to a presentation that, if you received a paper invitation, put on the back. 4 years of Saints and Scholars, 3 years of undergraduate study, lifetime of memories. From the day we arrive on this planet and blinking, step into the sun, there is more to be seen that can ever be seen, more to do that can ever be done. I believe these wise words from Sir Elton John and Disney's The Lion King have really made a mark on how I view the world and how my journey through Holy Cross College and life has been shown up to this point. But it would be remiss to not start anywhere else but Brother Theophane Schmidt, CSC. Brother Theophane was a Holy Cross brother in the first half of the 20th century who attended the University of Notre Dame and studied pre-health. He later went on to work in Rome with the congregation, constructing the Generalate, and then he went on to Liberia, where he unfortunately died in a motorcycle crash. While still in the States, he founded Gilmore Academy, which is in Cleveland, Ohio. Brother Theophane means a lot to me because he was my great-great-uncle. I grew up hearing stories of Brother Theophane from my grandfather and was always inspired by his obedience to the church and his zeal for the faith. A couple weeks before my grandfather passed my freshman year of college here at Holy Cross, he said to me, "You remind me so much of Brother Theophane." Those were some of the last words that I heard from my grandfather, and it really marked my entire journey here at Holy Cross. I find myself visiting Brother Theophane's grave pretty consistently and have had the opportunity to actually research and see some of the primary sources of Brother Theophane's life. And so without Brother Theophane, I wouldn't be who I am today. Brother Theophane also, upon coming to Holy Cross College, I learned that he was on a board of brothers that essentially conceptualized the idea of Holy Cross College. Father Tyson told me that about a week into my first year here at Holy Cross. And so beyond the family aspect of Brother Theophane, without Brother Theophane, I wouldn't be here, as he wouldn't have pioneered the place which we stand today. So a little bit about my beginning. I was born on a Friday afternoon, January 5th, 2001, in Decatur, Indiana, about 20 miles south of Fort Wayne. I'm the oldest of 3 younger brothers, and I went to Catholic school, preschool through 8th grade. My family is very large, so large, in fact, that we host family reunions in the different cities that we have a lot of members living in, whether it be Decatur, Indiana, Columbus, Ohio, or Chicago, Illinois. And so growing up, family was a really big aspect of my life. Some of my first friends were my cousins, as we can see here, after I caught a bluegill with my cousin Sarah. But with that, the music and arts also just really were captivating my mind. I was always a natural born performer. There's a video of me in 3rd grade, whenever I joined the school choir, singing "You Can't Stop the Beat" from Hairspray, and I'm just dancing my little heart out. And so if you've known me for any amount of time, you know that energy has persisted to this day. 2 other really important aspects of my life that were really formed in growing up were my faith and the Lion King. As we can see here, my sophomore year of high school, I was actually able to play Mufasa in a production of The Lion King Jr. at Civic Theater about 10 minutes from my house. And so my dream of performing this narrative that had really transformed my life and marked a lot of it had finally come to fruition. And so it was really a big part of my life. My faith, however, because I was in Catholic school, was just very normalized. I honestly treated the Catholic faith as a sort of textbook way of life. I was known to be really good in religion class and be like #1 altar server, but I never really lived it out. I didn't have this personal relationship with Christ, which made my transition to public high school very rough. So that is 2015-2016 school year. And as I mentioned, that transition to public high school left me confused, worried. I was transitioning from very small classes to larger ones. Friend groups were shifting. I was in new extracurriculars, and my faith sort of came under an identity crisis. This led to a really dark time in my life, filled with depression and actually a idea to end my own life. I made this painting this past year to depict how 2016 was for me. As I just mentioned, we can see that in the first panel here. Depressed, downtrodden, not knowing where to go. It wasn't until March of my freshman year of high school that things began to change and really start forming me to be who I am today. While I wasn't really involved in youth group, I went to this one breakfast that they were hosting after Sunday Mass. And while there, they were advertising for a retreat called Ignited. I was interested, but I never got the stuff around to actually go. And so I wasn't planning on being able to go on this retreat. And then the Friday afternoon that the retreat was supposed to start, I get home from school and I see a duffel bag on my bed and registration sheets on my desk. I ask my mom, "What is this stuff?" She tells me, "Somebody canceled and there's a spot open for you at Ignited." And so I went. It was a great retreat. I was really healing from a lot of the anguish that I was feeling earlier that year. But it wasn't whole. I knew there was something more that I was about to experience. It was sort of like a magnetic feeling. What would happen at the end of the retreat planted the seeds of something that would change my life forever. 3 maroon-clad college students walked up on stage and presented a trailer for an experience that summer that their institution was putting on, where students would come to their college and study theology, specifically how theology impacts another area of humanity, whether it be media, human rights, public health, sustainability. This dynamic trailer with aerial shots of the college, dynamic music, and authentic witnessing to Christ drew me in. And that institute, of course, was Saints and Scholars, Holy Cross's own summer theology institute for high school students. I begged my parents to be able to go. I would pay them back. I was working concession stands that summer. Back then, it was only $125 to go, so it was much cheaper than it is now. And so it was feasible to work concession stands to pay that off. And in this time before attending Saints and Scholars that July, I was blessed to actually see a live action Broadway production of The Lion King, which I've mentioned earlier as a large part of my identity. I'd never even listened to the full Broadway soundtrack before. So in the second act, whenever a song started playing that I had never heard before, it took me by surprise. This song was called Endless Night. And it's whenever Simba, Timon, and Pumbaa are looking at the stars, and Timon and Pumbaa make fun of Simba for saying that the kings live up there. So Simba then goes and sings this very powerful power ballad. And it starts off all depressed. You promised you'd be there whenever I needed you. Whenever I called your name, you're not anywhere. Trying to hold on, just waiting to hear your voice. One word, just a word will do to end this nightmare. But then, halfway through the song, the tone radically shifts, and it becomes hopeful almost joyfully. I know that the night must end and that the sun will rise. I'll hear your voice deep inside. The clouds will clear, the sun will rise. That phrase, the sun will rise, became my personal mantra from that point onwards. At the end of June, right before I was to go off to Saints and Scholars, my family took a vacation to Cooperstown, New York, because my youngest brother Dominic was playing baseball in a tournament there. And while there, we were staying in this lodge that was hewn basically into the side of an Appalachian mountain. And I remember going out there on the patio in the mountains and belting this song. Something was to happen. I didn't know what, but it was going to change my life. Sure enough, 3 weeks later, I get to Saints and Scholars, and the gates of heaven open wide. Even in the first 3 days of the experience, I knew that I was called to theology. Before then, I thought I was going into zoology. I thought I was going to go work for National Geographic, be in Africa, photographing wild animals, probably a lot in part by my obsession with The Lion King. But I fell in love with the study of theology while at Saints and Scholars. And so, entering adoration on that Wednesday night of that week, I sat in front of that very first pew in the St. Joseph Chapel on the left, looking up at the Eucharist, looking up at Christ, asking, why me? Why choose me when all of these other students go to Catholic high school? They can take theology classes. They know so much more and can serve you so much better. And I heard one phrase in the back of my head over and over, but I wasn't really listening. And that phrase was, I am with you. There's a period of silence. And then the mentors that week who were singing music played a song that I had grown up with, but it took on a whole new meaning with this experience. And that song was You Are Mine, where the refrain goes, do not be afraid, I am with you. I have called you each by name. Come and follow me, I will bring you home. I love you, and you are mine. I cried harder than I ever had in that moment. I was experiencing heaven. This was what I was called to do, and Christ was with me through it all. And so, I became a completely different person. I was joyful. Theology had radically changed my entire worldview, my life, and my path to my future. I knew then that I wanted to come to Holy Cross and study theology. And so I continued to come to Saints and Scholars every summer until I graduated. So many remarkable friendships were formed by this institute, friendships that still last today, whether they're at Holy Cross, Notre Dame, or elsewhere. But yet, Saints and Scholars is only 1 week out of the year. And so back home, I entered this period of waiting, anticipation for what was to come after graduation. As my mom can probably tell you, I took every single opportunity I could to visit Holy Cross, sometimes even against her best interests. As we can see here, I actually learned how to do these cheerleader stunts. So I could do toe touches, I can do the splits. I continued on with show choir, and my senior year came, and I was actually the first applicant to Holy Cross that year, submitting it the day the application went live. I actually then took a visit to Holy Cross a few hours after I submitted my application with my friend Isabella. And so I really just knew that I was coming to Holy Cross, and trust me, everybody at my high school did too. I was declaring to the world that I was to be a Holy Cross saint. But the biggest way that I declared my love for Holy Cross and future as a saint came in January of 2019 when I had the opportunity to go to World Youth Day in Panama City, Panama. And so a week before we are to leave for the celebration, I get an email from the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. And it's a little cryptic because I had never received anything from them before about World Youth Day, but it says stuff to the effect, we've received some questions on what to wear when meeting the Pope. I'm confused. And then I realized that I had been selected to then be a cross bearer for the Via Crucis, the Way of the Cross. I celebrated. I called my mom. She was at work saying, I'm going to meet the Pope. She thought I was going to be in like a long line to meet him. Didn't realize it was going to be this big. Within an hour, I had calls from the diocese. We were all freaking out. And so I prepared for Panama even more so. Whenever we were down there, though, my chaperone gets a phone call saying, our lector hasn't shown up yet. He hasn't flown in, and we need somebody to practice so they can be lector. Can we change Dane to being lector? And so within the span of the week, I was shifted from a cross bearer to a lector. And so I spoke for Pope Francis for the Via Crucis, the Way of the Cross. That morning, I emailed people here at Holy Cross saying, hey, be watching EWTN tonight. I've got a big surprise for you. Within the clothing guidelines for lectors, it is supposed to either reveal your culture, your faith, or youthful spirit. There was only one way that I knew that I could express my faith. And so I chose to wear a Saints and Scholars shirt that evening to show to the world that I was to be a Holy Cross College saint. And then homecoming came. August 24th, 2019, I moved into Anselm Hall and was officially a Holy Cross College saint. This is a picture of me after the first day of classes, ironically enough, wearing that same shirt that I wore for Pope Francis. And I was finally home. That which I had longed for years was finally coming to fruition. And so, as we all know, you go to college to receive an education of the mind. Towards the end of my high school career and into college, St. Thomas Aquinas, who's a figure in theology, a very large one at that, began to have a huge influence on not just my academics, but also my spirituality. I began to see him as a friend, a very close one at that. And so the twisting of my academic life and my spirituality together began to occur. And I began to see education really as an encounter with God. And so whatever classes I was taking added some sort of spiritual depth to them. Homework began a way of bearing my cross. And one particular way in which that happened was with my Latin 1 and Latin 2 classes. Now, this was my first semester at Holy Cross, and I was the only one in my Latin class, both semesters. And so I really couldn't slack. If I didn't do the reading, we couldn't have classes. But I persevered and fell in love with the language. I had taken German all throughout high school, so I was really passionate about learning foreign languages. And this one-on-one study with Father Sullivan was especially fruitful for the remainder of my academic career. Since we only offer 2 Latin courses here at Holy Cross, I wanted more, but I couldn't take classes at Notre Dame in Latin just yet. And so I worked with him in the academic council to pioneer independent studies in Latin, where after a student has taken Latin 1 and Latin 2, they can take a 1 credit hour, basically an independent study on a figure or theme within Latin language. As was expected, I did my independent study on medieval Latin, specifically the works of St. Thomas Aquinas, really looking at his poetry and understanding Latin poetry and style. After that semester, 2 of my friends wanted to take Latin 2 in the spring, but had not taken Latin 1. This was an extended winter break due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and so we had about 2 months off. And so I volunteered and I taught them Latin 101 over winter break. This was really affirming as I not only knew the language, but I knew that I was able to teach it. And the second course that really brought about a large shift within my academic life was my first Notre Dame class, Church in the Modern World. Introduction to Vatican II. I was taking this course, which has a lot to do with ecclesiology, the study of the church, concurrently with Holy Cross's own ecclesiology course. And so my entire semester was filled with images of the church, the Second Vatican Council, and really just priming my imagination for the latter half of my college career. In particular, figure that I encountered was Cardinal Avery Dulles, and specifically his work, which is entitled Models of the Church. And one of the models that I absolutely fell in love with was the sacramental model. And I actually had to do a presentation on this said model within my Holy Cross College ecclesiology class. Needless to say, I immersed myself in this sacramental imagination. I actually didn't do too well in this presentation for my Holy Cross College class, and so it sort of gave me this like drive to like really show that I knew what the chapter was talking about. And I remember as I'm walking back from Notre Dame towards Holy Cross on that infamous Holy Hike, I was thinking to myself, as I had just been really developing my visual arts minor, about the theology of art. And I just stopped halfway through this holy hike there on Door Road and exclaimed to myself, "It's sacramental." This would later prove to be extremely foundational and guiding for what I would then go on to research for my senior thesis. But as we know, you don't just go to Holy Cross College to receive an education of the mind, but rather also an education of the heart. I was answering the question of vocation. Who am I? What am I called to do? Right before COVID-19 hit, I was asked to found a club that would really emphasize the Catholic intellectual tradition here at Holy Cross College. Obviously, as we have seen, I wanted to take the patronage of St. Thomas Aquinas, and so we named it Studium Thomisticum, Zeal of St. Thomas Aquinas. Throughout my studies, whether it be through theological practicum or formation with my SPES internship with campus ministry, I really grew in the virtue of courage to really become who I was meant to be. And concurrently with that, because I hold a very mystical, one could say, view of the world, I became very sensitive to beauty in the world and how we are to participate in that. And with that, I grew exponentially in my devotion to the mystery of the incarnation, the Word made flesh, the breaking in of God into humanity in the person of Jesus Christ. And so that would later influence my entire senior year, as my final studio art class for my visual arts minor centered around this idea of participating in the incarnation and the goodness of materiality, whether it be through beauty and art or through music. I wanted to express that which I had stirring within my heart. And so the 4 pieces that I produced last semester actually all centered around, to some degree, my spirituality of the incarnation. One of the pieces, 2016, which we saw earlier, was actually selected to be the President's Choice Award for the 2022 Juried Student Exhibition, which I was deeply honored to accept. And following the trends within my spirituality and personal life, I really gained the courage to experience and experiment with new media forms and forms of creative process, whether it be listening to music, dancing and making stills to paint, or just really praying through my art. This course really exemplified a lot of which I had internally felt for the months leading up to the course. And then the second course that really just exemplified this academic work tied with my spirituality were my senior thesis seminars. Last semester, I wrote my theology senior thesis on the sacramental nature of art and architecture. So how our participation, consumption, and production of the beautiful works we see in our world really make visible to us the invisible realities of faith. This semester, continuing on with my love for media and transcendental truths, I wrote a philosophy senior thesis in which I talk about the ethics of the Pokemon universe. I was a big fan of Pokemon growing up, and so being able to really talk about whether or not we should be consuming this form of media was really beautiful. And I can't wait to present this research next week, 2 weeks from now, actually. And Pokemon is justifiable, and we ought to be playing it more. Beyond classes, I was deeply involved with extracurriculars here at Holy Cross from day one. My first semester, I was selected to be an Emmaus Bible study coordinator, where I would be coordinating a men's Bible study group that would meet weekly and discuss the readings for the upcoming Sunday. And then last year, along with being president and founder of Students Mysticum, I was involved in student government, running Dog Pound with student spirit and athletics. I was also a spes intern, being a head altar server for the college and coordinating schedules. Beyond that, I was involved with the Spezunica retreats, being on team as a liturgist for them and giving talks, as well as serving as a campus coordinator for Ascend Indiana, which is a nonprofit that connects students to Indiana jobs and internships. But it would be a lie to say that my Holy Cross journey isn't without its sorrows and its harm. Around March of last year, due to some valid concerns about my mental health and well-being, along with a unfound idea that I only did extracurriculars for the purpose of a political conquest of the college, I was asked to step back from all of my extracurricular leadership positions. This was a very hard time in my life. So much of my identity had been cropped up within Holy Cross College and what I was doing here. If I was to take realistically the quote of St. Thomas Aquinas, where he says, "It is in what we love that tells us what we are," what was I supposed to do when that which I loved seemed to be gone? And so from March until May, I experienced a dynamic that I had never thought would be possible with Holy Cross College. One of fear and anxiety, wishing to leave. I had begun questioning whether or not I was supposed to even be at Holy Cross. Friends after my freshman year told me that I had the GPA to transfer to Notre Dame, and I heard great things about their financial aid. Not to mention, as a theology major, Notre Dame is #1 in the world. And so I began questioning my entire life. And had it not been for friends throughout the rest of that semester, I don't know if I would have came back to Holy Cross. Whether it be going to Ukrainian Rite Divine Liturgy over the summer, or a traditional Latin Mass for the Feast of St. Joseph, or just being there as friends. These gentlemen here on screen reminded me of who I am and affirmed the goodness that I once thought was lost. And so, though I still felt like as if I was fleeing Holy Cross that May, I entered that summer and changed my viewpoint to a time of healing. I was involved with a young adult college ministry back in Fort Wayne called College Crew, in which many of the pilgrims from my Panama trip were on team for. And so there was a really rich rekindling of old friendships and founding of new friendships. I went to a wedding of my admissions counselor actually that summer and was able to see friends from Holy Cross I hadn't seen for a while at the wedding, which was also very healing. I took day trips to South Bend, probably more than my mother liked, and was able to really just dive back into the young adult Catholic community here in South Bend, not even associated with Holy Cross. I remember on one of these visits, though, I stopped by the St. Joseph's Chapel and felt a feeling of Holy Cross that I hadn't felt in a very long time. And that was this sense of mystery. That summer, I sat in the St. Joseph's Chapel and recalled that very first time that I went to Holy Cross back in high school. And so throughout the summer and my trips to South Bend, I regained the confidence to come back and finish out strong for my senior year. I then joined the masthead of the Irish Rover, which is Notre Dame's Catholic newspaper. I served as a social media coordinator this year. And through the mentorship within the theology department, I really began to heal as I had discerned this intellectual vocation and knew that I was going to be okay. Anxiety still persisted, though, and it wasn't until spring break of this past year that I fully experienced healing. And that came about with a pilgrimage to the Holy Land with the DeNicola Center for Ethics and Culture. I had been involved with the Soren Fellows since freshman year, quite frankly, right before COVID hit, so I didn't get to do much with them. But I knew that the Soren Fellows went on pilgrimages, and this was the first one that they had offered since COVID-19 hit the world. So I signed up, was accepted, and got very excited to go. And what was especially healing about Israel was that multiple events in my life before sort of represented themselves or were fulfilled in the Holy Land, whether it be skinning my toe tripping up the stairs in the city of David, just as I did on a retreat last April, or the anklet that was tied to my ankle in 2017 at Saints and Scholars in such a way that it would not come off, being fulfilled by this red bracelet purchased by our security guard as a pilgrimage sign from Jerusalem, tied in a way that it cannot come off. Or after the Via Crucis, the Via Dolorosa, us walking the footsteps of the Passion, and then at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, being able to read from Mass in front of the tomb of Christ, hearkening back to that which I took up greater participation in reading for World Youth Day. So many different things were cropping up, and it became thematic throughout the entire pilgrimage. But the biggest example of this dynamic came about in our first visit to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which houses where Christ was crucified and then buried. Whenever you enter the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, you immediately turn right and there's a very steep staircase. And that leads you to Calvary, where Christ was crucified. I remember approaching the altar there, since you kneel underneath the altar to venerate the spot where Christ was crucified. And I heard that phrase that brought me to Holy Cross again. I am with you. I knelt down and touched the rock by which my salvation burst forth into the world, and cried those same tears that I cried on that day in 2016. As I reflected on the entire pilgrimage, it woke me up. It reminded me of the constant presence of grace in my life. No matter what, Christ was with me, and if I stayed with him, things would be fine. I would be led to life. And nobody, nothing, no set of circumstances can take that away. So, who am I? I begin this slide with a quote from Servant of God, Dorothy Day. It is a terrible thing indeed to fall into the hands of the living God. Throughout my life, being able to experience Christ in a very real way, whether it be through theology, philosophy, history, or visual arts, I have been shaped to be who I am today. to love one another just as I've been loved. And so, what's next? I'm proud to announce that I have been accepted an offer from Villanova University to pursue my Master of Theological Studies degree there. While there in Philadelphia, I will be pursuing a dual concentration in systematic theology and historical theology. One day, I hope to teach systematics and liturgical studies, sharing the light of Christ, that which has brought me thus far. For it is better to illuminate than to merely shine, better to deliver unto others contemplated truths than to merely contemplate. I have been given so many gifts in my 6-7 years here at Holy Cross. And so it is my vocation as somebody to love and as somebody with this love for intellectual activity and academia that I give back. And so it is with utmost gratitude and thankfulness to this institution that I give back the first gift that I was ever given here. I'm giving back my original Saints and Scholars shirt, not as a goodbye, but as a declaration to the world of the power of this institution. Christ is present here. Let us go forward and share his presence with the world. For we must find our place on the path unwinding, in the everlasting, loving, eternal circle of life. Thank you.
I guess I gotta say something. Dane, thank you so much. It has been a joy to like almost literally watch you grow up, having been here and not necessarily participated actively in Saints and Scholars, but known of the energy, the enthusiasm, the zeal that you brought to us ever since we first hit retweet on one of your kicks and splits endeavors in the front of campus. And so I'm so glad to hear you say it's not goodbye, because whether I'll follow you around still for a while probably, and I know many of us will do the same thing. So thank you so much for sharing your story and for carefully crafting a narrative that walks us through the actual journey in your voice as only you could tell in that beautiful, unrepeatable way. So thank you so much for the gift of sharing your story with us. I really deeply enjoyed it. My job is to help start the conversation and keep things going from here. And so you did such a beautiful job of describing the theology department, the friends, the people who you've learned from. And that will no doubt carry over into the person who you hope to be inside of the classroom. And so while you still have some time to test and learn and grow, who do you hope students see in front of you, and what do you hope to keep in mind as you prepare to go on this journey that will eventually lead you in front of the classroom? Yeah, what are those things that you hope to be mindful of as you walk in each and every day?
Yeah, I definitely hope as an academic that what really shines through is much more than just my knowledge, but rather also my deep love for theology and ability to share that with the world. Because, you know, if we're to look at the study of theology, you can't do it in a removed state. For if God so loved the world that he sent his only son, you can't just blindly and stoically share that with the world. It requires passion. And so I hope that my passion and genuine love for the study of theology is shown through every second that my students see with me.
Thank you so very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Dane. As you know, I've listened to this 3 times. Yeah, and you've done a great job in just keep adding on to it and kind of clarifying. And I think that's because as you've been working on it, you've just been gaining all these insights. You did a much better job, great job, I thought. And just talking about your early childhood and being able to pick out all these elements, kind of showing us how to carry forward through your life. You did a fantastic job just talking about your time at Holy Cross and the whole impact that the whole academic experience had on you. I think the other thing that I find, I want to thank you for taking the risk, really, to expand and talk about that whole difficult period in your life and describing it very nicely as a healing process. Being able to be sort of on the other side of it, be able to get some sort of perspective on that. So as you've worked through Capstone, as you've worked through this whole presentation, it's sort of taken you through this deep reflection of your life. And I'm kind of wondering, now that it's almost finished, not quite, but we're getting there, when you look back on the whole Capstone experience, the experience of putting together this presentation, what is the one thing that sort of struck you where you might not have thought about that or reflected or had that insight had you not gone through this experience?
I think that the experiences that which I held this year wouldn't have been possible without that difficult period of my life last year. In being asked to step away from that which I loved so much, it opened the door to new possibilities. If I still ran for student body president last year and got it, I probably wouldn't have met the people I did with the Irish Rover. And likewise, I wouldn't have developed my friendship with people across the street at Notre Dame as much. And so as I've reflected, I've really grown to appreciate not only the opportunities here at the Tri-Campus that were made possible through this trying time, but also just really in general, really developing my friendships with people back home with that young adult ministry, or even those in South Bend, not even associated with the Tri-Campus. And so without this difficult time in my life, I wouldn't have been able to be open with these people and develop the relationships that I have today.
Thank you. And you mentioned, start here, it's hard for me to read my writing. You mentioned at least, I would say, about eight periods in your life where I would describe it or see it as a paradigm shift.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I spoke to you about that before, an experience where your paradigm or your worldview, your way of perceiving reality, way of perceiving God, all that suddenly shifts in an instant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And it was everything from the initial experience of Lion King, Sun and Shine, all the way through Saints and Scholars, I Am With You, the Youth Day, It's Sacramental, that kind of thing, and the return to the St. Joseph Center after dealing with some difficulties. All of those were rather, they were paradigm shifts for me. And I'm kind of wondering, here comes a tough question. Can you sort of take all of those and talk about what was the growth or the maturity or the image that you had of God or the experience of God? How did that change as you were going through all?
Yeah, so I would say whenever I got started with theology, so like that first half of my life before Holy Cross, it went from a very textbook way of looking at who God is to much more personal, which then developed into a very much so eternal way of looking at God. And so looking at these mysteries that have deep troves of knowledge and just reflective quality for my life. It wasn't until about junior year here that I really started to dive into a lot of the more eternal aspects of God, while still keeping that personal aspect. And so really just growing into this very incarnational lifestyle. I had the divine and I had the human, but it was really a process of putting them together in such a way that is akin to Christ. So, yeah.
I saved my most critical question for last.
Okay.
You were responsible for the two guys taking Latin.
Yes.
Did they pass?
They did. They got A's in Latin. So I was a good teacher.
Take responsibility. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm a little flabbergasted by your ability to tell stories and narrative, and that's just a very powerful parent skill in who you are as a person, and it certainly shows up in your art. It always shows up in your writing, but to see it today on the stage is remarkable and probably an unforgettable experience for me. But there was one time when, so I always expected like the best out of Dane. And so it was in our Avery Dulles class where he had to talk about the sacramental nature of the church. And it ended up, like you said, not to be what you had hoped, but meaning that it was hard for sometimes a lot of theology students to sort of move out of concepts of faith learned from childlike, like, oh, there's 7 sacraments. What do you mean the church is a sacrament? Church is a sacrament. And so that was like this incredible aha moment in your final paper, like everything is sacramental. And of course, you mentioned that. If you were to have a chance to talk to maybe not incoming theology students, but maybe those who've had a couple of classes under their belt, how would you explain that transition, or as Brother said, that paradigm shift? Where as a theology student, you have to move from sort of the categories of faith from faith formation into sort of this broader, you use the language of eternal, but being able to see beyond the words, if you will, words only being symbols, into the reality of experience.
Yeah, I would definitely say something that is vital as an academic, as a scholar really, in transitioning from preconceived notions from faith into a much more abstract or eternal, as I used, systems of thought, is really an emphasis on the virtue of humility. To really allow yourself to be formed by the text that you're reading and not come in with preconceived notions like, oh, this text talks about homosexuality. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. I don't like this text. That's not what the point of the text is. And so it really does require humility in order to really allow yourself to be formed by the text. And likewise, allow the Spirit to form you too. You know, God created Adam out of clay, and so we too must be formed eternally.
Okay, so I'm just going to push a wee bit more.
Okay.
What do you think freedom has to do with what we just? How do we become more free when we make that transition?
I think we become more free whenever we make this transition to humility, because we are able to experience, especially in theology, God in so many more in beautiful ways than previously thought of. And it really transforms your just ability to participate in existence. And so by allowing yourself to be formed by the text that you're reading, you are opening your own doors towards new ways of thinking and just existing, and it deepens it so much more. And so freedom comes into play as your horizons just expand, really, and there's so much more to explore and to really make your own as well within intellectual activity. And so yeah.
So anyone who loves sacramental imagination and incarnation is, as much as I do, will just be a hero in my book.
You may have saw me call an audible, which I want to do sometimes during these. So I'd like to offer the art department an opportunity to ask a question of you as well.
My name is Angelo Ray Martinez. I'm one of the professors of visual arts here at the college, as well as the director of the visual art program. So I've worked a lot with Dane over the past few years. Yeah, so I was thinking back to some of the first classes when you were in there, and I remember even in the drawing one class before you had really started to explore some of the theological aspects of your work. Maybe you were, and I just wasn't conscious of it, but I remember the Lion King and some of these other things, and it's cool just hearing your narrative and be like, oh, I remember that, or I remember this, and kind of being able to piece some of the things together. Really my question is dealing with the visual arts. So you're a visual arts minor, theo major. Most curious about the arts is oftentimes a reflection of consciousness. We see you reflecting your consciousness in there, a number of your artworks, but the arts is also a way of, has a tendency or can be used to actually alter our consciousness or to modify our consciousness in certain ways. I'm curious how being an artist, exploring the arts, both in here at Holy Cross and beforehand, how your interaction with the arts has facilitated some of your growth, either as a student, a theologian, or just you as a person.
Yeah, so as I've really been diving into arts ever since I was a kid, whether it be being in show choir or the visual arts, as I have really pioneered here at Holy Cross within my life, it really just brings about much more of a sensitivity and appreciation of beauty in the world, which becomes very tangible, whether it be reflecting on how I'm throwing the pottery on the wheel in high school, or the very physical actions of cutting the stained glass that I did in painting too. It really is incarnational, as it fleshes that which I had thought about previously in new and beautiful ways. And oftentimes with my own art especially, there will be, to quote from Bob Ross, happy little mistakes that turn out to actually have a lot of really cool, significant meaning. And so it's really a way of being formed by art, forming art, and allowing art to form the environment in which it finds itself. And so it can even be in stuff that's outside of like the artwork itself. Like I remember whenever I was making stained glass windows for painting too, I would cut my fingers very consistently. And, you know, it really just brought about a new idea of the link between art and suffering. And so yeah.
Thank you. And I guess now, after your answer, I'm curious about how it affected specifically your understanding or your interaction with some of the theological texts, which were also forming you. Could you maybe expand just a little bit more and just direct connections to theology?
Yeah. So, oh gosh, where to start? This is like my entire academic career. But I would definitely say that as an artist, I would draw really on the rich tradition found in Eastern Catholic and Eastern Orthodox spirituality, in which art has a very tangible nearness of presence to the divine, makes visible the invisible. It's really incarnational. And so like the practice of art making is, for me, inherently theological. And so it's really impacted my theology, as I'm no longer just reading books and doing Lectio Divina to do my work, but I'm also making something. I'm also very tangibly hands-on with my theological work, which gives it a new depth as well. as it becomes much more experiential and able to be applied to other facets of my life. Because like, whether it be like the theology and media and arts that really just brought me to theology, that influenced my philosophy senior thesis of how can we reflect on that which we have and bring it to a new light as well. So,
Thank you.
So I've been like curious at like how I was going to phrase this question, because I'm worried that it's the same question twice, but I don't think it has to be. So you've been a part of this college for a while, and you know and have reflected on the things you've done and what you've left here. But as you think about like not being here, what changes do you think you've made for the better, or you've helped pioneer, or you've helped push, or what do you like? How do you think Dane will still be here when Dane is physically not here for a little bit? That maybe is something that
yeah, I definitely think my relationships with people, just as the figures who formed me while I was in high school in my early years at Holy Cross, Dave Naberkowski, Catherine Oliva, Will Spretniak, you know, I hope to be that same sort of model that they were to me. My, you know, impact on campus may not be as tangible as something on the YouTube channel with the Saints and Scholars logo and everything by David Slonkowski, but I just hope that the memory of what Holy Cross has done for me and how I've shared that with the Tri-Campus really remains in the lives of the people that remain after I take off here in August.
beautiful. And I conclude all capstones with this next question, which you've said a lot of big things, but this one is personal. And I'm going to ask you, as you think back about this, and these people who are watching live here, virtual, anywhere, and are listening to you, they're here because they love you and they support you. And we kind of would love a glimpse into what's going to be behind your smile as you walk across the stage. What are you most proud of yourself for accomplishing during your time here?
It's not something that I have accomplished of my own merit. As I walk across that stage in 2 short weeks, the only thing going through my mind will be that phrase that brought me here, and one that I offer to you all today. I am with you.
Say thank you to Dane one more time.